Jia Kim wiped the sweat from her forehead as she tightened the last bolt on the air filter. The metal walkways of Colony 12 creaked under her small frame. Far below, the mining machines hummed, digging deep into the planet's crust for valuable minerals. "Filter 32 fixed," she said into her comm device. No one answered. They rarely did. At 23, Jia was the youngest maintenance worker in Sector 7. Her black hair was always tied back in a simple ponytail, her hands always dirty from fixing things. People passed her in hallways without a second glance. She was nobody special. 10 years ago, a mining accident had killed her parents. The colony leaders had let her stay, but only because she showed skill with machines. Now she fixed the systems that kept everyone alive, working in narrow shafts and forgotten corners where no one else wanted to go. "Better check the oxygen levels in Section B," she muttered to herself. Talking helped fill the silence of the empty maintenance tunnels. As she walked through the colony's dim corridors, she passed workers rushing to the cafeteria for dinner. No one invited her to join. No one ever did. Reaching the main control room, Jia noticed something strange on the long-range scanners. 3 large objects were approaching the colony. They weren't scheduled supply ships. "Hey, Han," she called to the board security officer. "Something's coming." Han glanced at the screen and his eyes widened. He hit the alert button, and red lights began flashing throughout the colony. "Everyone to emergency stations." Han's voice boomed over the speakers. "Unknown vessels approaching." This is not a drill. Jia stood frozen as chaos erupted around her. Colony 12 had no real defenses. It was just a mining operation, too small and too far from Earth to matter to anyone. The first blast hit before anyone could react. The colony shook violently, throwing Jia against a wall. Alarms shrieked as emergency doors slammed shut. "We're under attack," someone yelled. "It's the Morans." Jia had heard stories about the Moran Empire, an alien civilization conquering human colonies one by one, taking resources and people. But Colony 12 was so small, so unimportant. Why would they come here? More explosions rocked the station. Through a viewport, Jia saw them. 3 massive ships, sleek and deadly, hovering above the colony. Smaller craft poured out, heading toward the main entrances. "Everyone to the emergency shuttles," Colony Director Park ordered over the comms. "Grab only essential items. Move now." People ran in panic. Jia tried to follow but got pushed aside in the rush. A loud crack sounded above, and part of the ceiling collapsed, blocking her path to the evacuation area. "Help," she called, but her voice was lost in the noise. Making a quick decision, Jia ducked into a maintenance shaft, one of the many hidden passages she used for her work. Through small vents, she watched in horror as strange creatures stormed the colony. They stood 7 feet tall, with gray-blue skin and 4 arms. They carried weapons that fired beams of white light, stunning anyone they hit. The colonists didn't stand a chance. One by one, they fell and were dragged away. Jia crawled deeper into the maintenance system, her heart pounding. These tunnels were her domain, too small for the large aliens to follow. She reached a junction with a view of the landing bay and watched as the last emergency shuttle filled with stunned colonists. The ship departed, leaving behind an eerie silence. Jia waited, barely breathing, as alien footsteps echoed through the colony. Hours passed. Finally, the invaders left too. She emerged cautiously from her hiding place. The colony was damaged but still functioning. Life support systems continued to work. Food stations remained stocked. But Jia was completely alone. She stood in the empty control room, looking at the scanner that now showed nothing but stars. Everyone was gone, taken by the Moran Empire. The colony that had been her home, filled with people who barely noticed her, was now empty. Jia Kim, the nobody who fixed things in the shadows, was the only human left on Colony 12. And somehow, she would have to survive. 3 days had passed since the attack. Jia sat on the floor of the main control room, surrounded by screens showing empty hallways. She had barely slept, checking every corner of the colony through security cameras, afraid the aliens might return. Think, Jia, she told herself. What do you need to survive? She made a simple list: air, water, food, and power. The colony's life support systems were damaged but still working. Food supplies would last for months if she was careful. Water recyclers were functioning at half capacity, enough for one person. But power was a problem. The main reactor had been hit during the attack. It was leaking radiation in 3 places. I can fix this, Jia said, gathering tools from her maintenance kit. Fixing things was what she did best, what she had always done. She worked for hours in the reactor room, wearing a protection suit that was too big for her small frame. Her hands moved with practiced skill, sealing leaks and rerouting power. By nightfall, the reactor was stable again. Back in her small living quarters, Jia allowed herself to cry for the first time. Everyone she knew, not friends exactly, but people she had lived among for 10 years, was gone. Taken by creatures she had only heard about in news reports from distant colonies. The Moran Empire, she whispered, wiping her tears. She needed to learn more about them. The next morning, Jia went to the communications center. Most of the equipment was smashed, but the main receiver was intact. She turned it on and scanned all frequencies. At first, she heard nothing but static. Then, a strange clicking sound came through the speakers. It wasn't human. The sounds had patterns, like a language. Jia recorded the transmission and played it again and again. After listening for hours, she began to notice certain clicks and hums that repeated. Could this be how the Morans communicated? While exploring damaged sections of the colony, Jia found something the aliens had left behind. A small device with blinking lights. It looked like a communication tool. She carefully picked it up and brought it back to her workstation. "Let's see what you can tell me," she said, connecting wires to the alien device. For days, Jia worked on understanding the Moran technology. She had always been good with machines, figuring out how things worked by taking them apart. This was no different, just more complex. The alien device contained star charts and coordinates. Jia managed to display them on the colony's main screen. Red dots showed human colonies that had already been attacked. A larger cluster of dots, likely Earth and its closest colonies, was marked with symbols she couldn't understand. They're planning something big, she realized. One night, while scanning frequencies again, Jia picked up a human transmission. The voice was weak and filled with static, but she could make out the words. Prisoners being taken to mining moon. Forced labor. Plan to attack Earth within 6 months. Jia's hands shook as she tried to respond, but the transmission faded before she could make contact. In the days that followed, Jia explored more of the damaged colony. In a section hit hard by the attack, she found more alien technology, parts of a weapon system, and what looked like armor. "They're not invincible," she said, examining a cracked piece of the alien armor. "Their equipment can break. They can be hurt." Jia stood and looked out a viewport at the stars. Somewhere out there, the people of her colony were prisoners. Earth was in danger, and she was the only one who knew what was coming. She had spent her life being invisible, fixing things in the background while others ignored her. Now, being invisible might be her greatest strength. Jia Kim had been nobody, but standing alone in the empty colony, surrounded by alien technology, she was slowly understanding. She made a decision. "I won't just survive here," she said, her voice stronger than it had ever been. "I'm going to fight back." Jia stood at the entrance of the abandoned mining facility. It was located 2 miles from the main colony, connected by an underground tunnel. This would be her new base. "Perfect," she said, looking around the large space. The mining facility had its own power generator, tools, and enough room for what she planned. Most importantly, it was built deep into a mountain of iron ore, which would hide her activities from any scanning equipment. Over the next week, Jia moved essential supplies from the colony to her new base. food, water purifiers, medical kits, and all the alien technology she had found. She set up workstations with colony computers and connected them to the main communication array. "Time to really learn about you," she said, sitting down at her main desk. The alien device she had found contained more than just star charts. It held information about Moran ships, weapons, and communication codes. Jia spent days studying the alien language, slowly figuring out patterns and meanings. She learned that Moran ships used a special frequency to communicate with each other. By adjusting the colony's communication array, she could listen to their transmissions. "Patrol Sector 12B complete. No signs of human activity," came a translated voice over her speakers. Jia made notes of patrol schedules and ship movements. The Morans were methodical, following strict patterns. This was something she could use against them. While studying the alien technology, Jia discovered something important. Moran ships were vulnerable to certain electromagnetic frequencies. Their engines would stall if hit with the right signal. "That's it," she whispered, an idea forming in her mind. Using parts from the colony's mining equipment, Jia built a device that could send out powerful electromagnetic pulses on the frequency she had discovered. It was bulky and used a lot of power, but it might work against a Moran ship. One night, while listening to Moran communications, Jia learned something that made her blood run cold. Human prisoners working well in the mineral mines. Production is ahead of schedule. The attack on the human homeworld will proceed as planned. Earth had less than 5 months before the Moran fleet would attack. Jia needed to act sooner than she had thought. She pushed herself harder, sleeping only a few hours each night. Her hands became rough and calloused from working with tools and machinery. But her mind stayed sharp, absorbing everything she could learn about the enemy. The most valuable discovery came when Jia managed to hack deeper into the Moran communication network. She found that their entire military operated through central command nodes. All orders flowed from these nodes to the fleet. "If I could disrupt even one of these nodes," she said, "their ships would lose coordination." It seemed impossible for one person to fight an alien empire. But Jia had spent her life being underestimated, being invisible. Perhaps being unseen was now her greatest weapon. One morning, Jia picked up an alert on the Moran frequency. A scout ship was heading to Colony 12 to check for any remaining resources. "They're coming back," she said, her heart racing. This was her chance to test her weapons, to see if her plans could actually work. She gathered the electromagnetic pulse device she had built and set up her computer to monitor the approaching ship. From the viewport of her mining facility, Jia watched the small Moran vessel enter the planet's atmosphere. It glowed red against the dark sky as it descended toward the colony. Jia took a deep breath. She was just one human against an empire of aliens who had conquered dozens of worlds. The odds were impossible. But for the first time in her life, Jia Kim wasn't fixing someone else's problems in the background. She wasn't being ignored or forgotten. She was about to make the Moran Empire notice her. "Let's see what one nobody can do," she said, and pressed the button to activate her weapon. Jia's finger trembled as she pressed the button. The electromagnetic pulse device hummed loudly, sending invisible waves toward the Moran scout ship. For a moment, nothing happened. The alien vessel continued its smooth descent toward the colony. "Come on," Jia whispered. "Work." Suddenly, the scout ship jerked sideways. Its engines flickered and died. The ship began to fall, spinning out of control. It crashed into an empty field 2 miles from the colony with a thunderous boom that shook the ground. Jia stared at the screen, hardly believing what she had just done. She had actually disabled a Moran ship. "It worked," she said, her voice small, in the empty facility. She wanted to celebrate, but there was no time. The crashed ship was an opportunity she couldn't waste. Quickly, Jia gathered a toolkit, an oxygen mask, and a small stunner she had found in the colony's security office. Traveling through underground maintenance tunnels, she made her way to the crash site. Smoke rose from the downed vessel. Its sleek hull was cracked open, revealing strange machinery inside. Hiding behind rocks, Jia watched the ship carefully. Was anyone still alive inside? After 10 minutes with no movement, she approached cautiously. The ship's door was partly open. Jia slipped inside, stunner ready. The interior was bathed in dim blue light. Control panels with alien symbols lined the walls. On the floor lay a Moran pilot, not moving. Jia checked the alien carefully. It was dead, its 4 arms splayed at odd angles. She felt a moment of guilt, quickly pushed aside by the memory of what these creatures had done to her colony. Working quickly, Jia examined the ship's systems. The navigation computer was still intact. She disconnected it and placed it in her bag. This would give her access to all Moran flight paths and patrol schedules. She also took weapons, 3 slim rifles that fired energy beams. And most valuable of all, she found a complete set of Moran armor. As Jia was finishing her salvage, a light on the ship's control panel began to flash red. A voice spoke in the clicking Moran language. She had been studying their communications long enough to understand some of it. Scout Ship 7, report status. Your signal disappeared. Recovery team dispatched. Arrival in 6 hours. They were coming to check on the crashed ship. Jia worked faster, taking everything useful she could carry. Then she returned to her base through the underground tunnels, the heavy Moran technology weighing down her bag. Back at the mining facility, Jia connected the alien navigation computer to her systems. Star maps filled her screens, showing the positions of all Moran ships in the sector. She could now track their movements in real time. They're sending 3 ships, she said, noting the approaching vessels on the map. Jia knew she couldn't take on 3 ships with her electromagnetic pulse device. It needed 12 hours to recharge. She needed a different plan. Looking at the colony blueprints, she found her answer. The mining tunnels ran for miles under the surface. Some were filled with explosive gases from deep drilling. This will work, she said, grabbing her tools. Over the next 5 hours, Jia set traps throughout the tunnels leading from the crash site. She rigged mining charges to detonate when disturbed and positioned the alien weapons to fire automatically when triggered. When the recovery team arrived, Jia watched from a hidden bunker as 3 Moran ships landed near the crash site. 12 tall aliens emerged, carrying equipment. They examined the downed ship and found their dead comrade. Then they spread out, searching the area. One group headed for the tunnel entrance Jia had left partially open. "Come on," she murmured. "Just a little closer." The first alien stepped into the tunnel. A moment later, explosions rocked the ground. Alien screams mixed with the sound of energy weapons firing. When silence fell, Jia checked her screens. 8 Morans lay dead. 4 had retreated to their ships, clearly panicked. 1 ship took off immediately, leaving the others behind. The remaining aliens fired wildly into the tunnels, hitting nothing. Jia smiled grimly. The mighty Moran Empire had just learned that someone was fighting back, and they had no idea it was just one human woman. News of the failed recovery mission traveled quickly through the Moran fleet. 3 weeks later, Jia intercepted urgent communications between Moran commanders. Sector 7 shows signs of human resistance. Scout ship destroyed. Recovery team suffered heavy losses. Situation requires immediate attention. Jia smiled as she listened. The Morans thought they were dealing with a group of fighters, not a single maintenance worker. "Let's make them believe it even more," she said to herself. Using the Moran armor she had taken, Jia created 6 human-sized dummies. She placed them around the colony in spots visible from the air, making it look like guards were patrolling. Then she programmed the colony's external speakers to play recorded human voices at random times. The navigation computer she had salvaged proved even more valuable than she had hoped. It contained codes to access the Moran communication network. Jia could now send false messages to confuse the enemy. Human resistance on Colony 12 growing stronger. She typed, using the Moran language she had learned, requesting reinforcements. Her plan was working. 3 days later, 5 large Moran warships appeared in orbit. They were diverting significant resources to deal with what they believed was an organized rebellion. But Jia knew she needed to do more than just deceive them. She needed to strike back in a way that would hurt their operations. Looking at the star charts, she noticed something important. All Moran ships in this sector stopped at a refueling station before heading to the front lines. If she could infiltrate that station, she could do real damage. "I need to get off this planet," she said, studying the maps. The next time Moran ships landed to search the colony, Jia was ready. She had modified the colony's cargo loading system to hide a special container, one with her inside it, along with supplies and weapons. When the Morans searched the colony and found nothing but decoys, they took several containers of mining equipment that seemed valuable. Among them was Jia's special container. The trip was uncomfortable. Jia spent 18 hours in darkness, feeling every bump and turn as the ship traveled through space. Finally, the movement stopped. She heard alien voices and machinery. Carefully, she opened her container just enough to peek out. She was in a massive cargo bay filled with supplies. Moran workers moved around, checking inventory. Jia waited until night cycle, when the cargo bay was empty. Then she slipped out, wearing the stolen Moran armor. It was too big for her small frame, but in the dim light, she might pass for a Moran from a distance. Moving through the station, Jia found what she was looking for, the central computer core. Guards stood at the entrance, but a maintenance duct above provided another way in. Inside the computer room, Jia worked quickly. She connected a small device she had built to the main terminal. The device contained a virus that would slowly corrupt navigation data across the entire Moran fleet. "Ships will jump to wrong coordinates," she whispered. "Fuel calculations will be off. Nothing obvious, just small errors that will cause big problems." As she finished uploading the virus, an alarm sounded somewhere in the station. Not for her. She was still undetected, but she needed to leave quickly. Jia made her way back to the cargo bay and hid inside an empty container marked for delivery to a mining colony, one where she knew human prisoners were being held. 2 days later, as her container was being unloaded, Jia heard human voices for the first time in months. Through a crack, she saw people in chains, working under alien guards. Her heart ached to help them right away, but she knew she wasn't ready. She needed to stick to her plan. For now, she slipped away unseen, finding a hiding place in the mining colony's air ducts. The legend of the ghost of Sector 7 was spreading among the Morans. Ships were experiencing unexplained failures. Navigational systems were malfunctioning. And no one suspected it was all because of one woman who had once been nobody. The mining colony was a grim place. Thousands of humans worked in deep tunnels, digging for rare minerals under Moran guards. Their faces were thin and tired, their backs bent from long hours of hard work. Jia watched from hidden vents for 3 days, learning the patterns of the guards and the layout of the facility. She noticed that the humans were kept in large barracks, locked in at night with minimal security. The Morans didn't expect resistance from broken, exhausted prisoners. But Jia saw something the aliens missed: whispers among the humans, small acts of defiance when guards weren't looking. Hope wasn't completely gone. In one barracks, a tall man with broad shoulders seemed to be respected by the others. Guards called him Captain with mocking voices. Jia decided he would be her first contact. That night, she slipped through the air ducts and dropped silently into the barracks while everyone slept. She gently woke the man, her hand over his mouth. "I'm a friend," she whispered. "My name is Jia Kim." The man's eyes widened with surprise, but he stayed quiet. "I'm Captain Tai," he said softly. "Earth Defense Force. Are you part of the rescue mission?" Jia shook her head. "There is no mission. Just me. I escaped Colony 12 when the Morans attacked." Captain Tai looked confused. "Just you? The Morans are saying their ships are being attacked by human fighters. They call them the ghosts of Sector 7. "That's me," Jia said with a small smile. "I've been causing problems for them." Disbelief showed on Ta's face, but he listened as Jia quickly explained what she had done. His expression changed to respect. "One person did all that," he whispered. "And I'm planning more," Jia said. "I need your help. The Morans are preparing to attack Earth in 3 months. We need to slow them down." For the next hour, they talked in hushed voices. Captain Ta had military training and knew Moran weaknesses that Jia hadn't discovered yet. Together, they made plans. "I can organize the prisoners," Ta said. "Small acts of resistance at first. Work slowdowns, minor equipment failures. Nothing obvious, but enough to delay mineral shipments. And I'll continue disrupting their communications and navigation." Jia added, "Make them think they're facing a much larger enemy." Before leaving, Jia gave Tai a small device she had built. "This will let us communicate," she explained. "Use it only in emergencies. I'll contact you in 10 days with the next steps." As Jia slipped back into the vent system, Ta whispered, "You know what they're saying about you in the Moran fleet. That humans have a secret weapon. If they only knew it was one woman." Over the next 2 weeks, strange events plagued the Morans. Ships arrived at wrong destinations. Equipment failed at critical moments. Mining production slowed as humans found subtle ways to resist without getting caught. In her hidden base inside the mining colony's ventilation system, Jia intercepted a message that made her heart race faster. "All ships alert. Emperor Krell demands capture of human resistance leaders. Special reward for the ghost of Sector 7. Failure will not be tolerated." The Moran Emperor himself was now involved. Jia had become important enough to attract his attention. That same day, in the prisoner barracks, Captain Ta gathered trusted humans around him. "Have you heard the stories?" he asked quietly. "About the ghost who fights the Morans alone?" Men and women nodded, hope flickering in their eyes. "She's real," Ta said. "I've met her. And soon, we'll all join her fight." Word spread through whispers from prisoner to prisoner, from mining colony to transport ships, reaching thousands of captured humans. One woman was fighting the Moran Empire and winning. For the first time since being captured, humans began to believe they might survive, that someone was coming to help them. Jia Kim, once invisible and forgotten, had become a legend. And legends, as the Morans were about to learn, were dangerous things. Emperor Krell slammed his 4 fists onto the command table, making his officers jump. Reports of failures across his fleet had driven him into a rage. "How can one human colony cause so much trouble?" he roared. "Find this ghost and bring them to me." The Emperor's flagship was the largest vessel in the Moran fleet. It carried weapons that could destroy entire cities. Now it was heading toward Sector 7, along with 3 advanced warships. Krall had decided to handle the situation personally. Meanwhile, Jia had returned to Colony 12 through a series of dangerous space jumps. Her plan was growing bigger and riskier. Captain Tai and the other prisoners would start a major uprising in 3 days. Jia needed to create a diversion that would pull Moran forces away from the mining colonies. What she didn't expect was to see the Emperor's flagship appear on her scanners. "That's not good," she muttered, watching the massive ship enter orbit around her planet. Smaller ships descended to the colony surface. Hundreds of Moran soldiers poured out, conducting a full-scale search. They destroyed her decoys and swept through every building. Jia hid in her base beneath the mining facility, watching through security cameras as the aliens tore the colony apart looking for her. "They're really angry now," she said with a small smile. But inside, she was scared. This was the Emperor himself hunting her. The situation had become far more dangerous than she had planned. Still, this was also an opportunity. If she could somehow disable the Emperor's flagship, it would throw the entire Moran command structure into chaos. Jia had been working on a powerful electromagnetic pulse device, much stronger than her first one. It was built using the colony's main power core, a device normally used to power an entire mining operation. If it worked, it could temporarily disable any ship in orbit. But to use it, She would need to get back into the main colony, right where the Moran soldiers were searching. No choice, she decided. It's now or never. Using maintenance tunnels, Gia made her way through the underground network toward the colony's power center. Twice she had to hide as Moran patrols passed by. Her heart pounded so loudly, she was sure they would hear it. Finally, she reached the power core. The massive machine hummed with energy. Gia connected her device to it and began the charging sequence. A sudden noise made her turn. 3 Moran soldiers stood in the doorway, weapons aimed at her. Human detected. One shouted in their clicking language. Gia dropped to the floor as energy beams fired over her head. She rolled behind the power core, pulled out her stolen Moran weapon, and fired back. One alien fell, then another. The third Moran called for backup before Gia's shot hit him in the chest. Alarms blared throughout the colony. She had minutes, maybe seconds, before more soldiers arrived. Working frantically, Gia finished connecting her device. The electromagnetic pulse was charged and ready. "I hope this works," she whispered, and pressed the activation button. A low hum built quickly to a high-pitched whine. The lights flickered and died. Then a massive wave of energy pulsed outward from the colony. In orbit, the Emperor's flagship suddenly lost power. Emergency lights flickered on as backup systems tried to respond. On the bridge, Emperor Krell roared with anger as his screens went dark. Confusion spread through the Moran fleet. With their main communication systems down, ships began firing at anything that moved. 2 Moran vessels collided in the darkness of space. On the colony surface, Moran soldiers found their weapons and communication devices dead. They milled about in confusion, waiting for orders that wouldn't come. Gia grabbed her bag and a breathing mask. While the Morans were disorganized, she had one more mission, her most dangerous yet. Near the colony's landing pad sat a small Moran shuttle, its systems temporarily offline from the pulse. If she could reach it before power returned, she could board the Emperor's flagship itself. "Time to meet the Emperor," Gia said, her voice steady despite her fear. The nobody from Colony 12 was about to confront the ruler of an empire. The Moran shuttle rose through the atmosphere, piloted by shaking hands. Gia had only practiced on simulators she had built based on alien technology. Now she was flying an actual Moran ship toward the Emperor's massive flagship. Emergency systems were still active on the flagship, casting a red glow across its hull. Smaller ships floated nearby, some damaged from colliding with each other after the pulse hit. "I can do this," Gia whispered to herself as she approached the giant vessel. With the main systems down, the flagship's automatic docking procedures were offline. Gia had to manually guide the shuttle into a small maintenance bay. The shuttle scraped against the walls as she landed, making a horrible screeching sound. Gia quickly put on the Moran armor she had modified to fit her small frame. From a distance, in the dim emergency lighting, she might pass for a young Moran. At least she hoped so. Stepping out of the shuttle, she checked her bag one last time. Inside was a data device containing a special virus, one designed to target the flagship's command systems. Gia moved through the red-lit corridors, passing confused Moran crew members. Most were too busy trying to restore power to notice one small crew member walking with purpose. Twice she had to hide when officers approached. Once she had to crawl through a maintenance duct to avoid a group of guards. Her heart pounded so loudly, she was sure everyone could hear it. Finally, Gia reached the central command node, the brain of the entire ship. 2 guards stood at the entrance, looking alert despite the emergency. Gia couldn't get past them unseen. She needed a distraction. From her bag, she took a small device she had built using Moran technology. When activated, it would create sounds of weapons fire and explosions. She slid it down a side corridor and pressed the remote trigger. Loud bangs and flashes erupted. The guards ran toward the noise, weapons ready. Gia slipped into the command node room. Inside, technicians worked frantically to restore systems. At the center stood a tall figure with ornate armor and a crown-like headpiece. Emperor Krell himself. Jia ducked behind a control panel, watching as the Emperor shouted orders. She needed to reach the main computer terminal, just 10 feet away. A technician stepped away from the terminal to report to the Emperor. This was her chance. Jia moved quickly to the terminal and plugged in her device. The virus began uploading immediately. In 30 seconds, it would take control of the ship's weapon systems and target the other Moran vessels. "What are you doing there?" A voice boomed in the Moran language. Jia turned to see Emperor Kral staring directly at her. His 4 eyes narrowed with suspicion. "You're too small for a crew member," he said, stepping closer. The virus needed 15 more seconds to complete. Jia had to stall. She removed her helmet, revealing her human face. A gasp went through the room. "It's the ghost," someone shouted. Emperor Krell's eyes widened with rage and disbelief. "A female human? You are the one who has damaged my fleet." "Impossible." "Not impossible," Jia said, standing straight despite her fear. "Just unexpected. You never thought to look for someone like me." The Emperor lunged toward her, but it was too late. The virus finished uploading. Screens around the room flickered as the system came under new control. "What have you done?" Krell roared as warning alarms blared. "I've taken your ship," Jia said calmly. "And now it's targeting your fleet." Outside, the flagship's massive weapons turned toward the nearest Moran warship and fired. Explosions bloomed in space as the confused Moran vessels returned fire on their Emperor's ship. Guards rushed into the room, surrounding Jia with weapons ready. Emperor Krell raised his hand to stop them. "Don't shoot her." "Not yet." His 4 eyes studied Jia with a mixture of rage and curiosity. "How did one human female cause so much damage to my empire?" Jia smiled. "Because you never saw me coming. No one ever did." On screens around the room, Moran ships fired on each other in confusion. The command structure was collapsing exactly as Jia had planned. And across space, at the mining colonies, Captain Tai and thousands of prisoners were rising up against their distracted guards. 6 months had passed since the day Jia Kim faced Emperor Krell on his flagship. The day everything changed. Now she stood in a grand hall on Earth, watching as human and Moran leaders gathered around a large table. Light streamed through tall windows, reflecting off the peace treaty that lay waiting to be signed. "Still hard to believe, isn't it?" Captain Ta said, standing beside her in a crisp military uniform decorated with medals. Jia nodded. The events after her confrontation with the Emperor had moved quickly. While she had been surrounded by guards on the flagship, the virus she uploaded had done more than turn Moran ships against each other. It had also broadcast her face and voice across all Moran communication channels. "I am Jia Kim of Colony 12. Her message had declared to every Moran ship and base. "I am the one you call the Ghost. I am just one human woman, and I have brought your empire to its knees." The impact had been immediate. Human prisoners, already organized by Captain Tai and inspired by stories of the Ghost, rose up across dozens of mining colonies. Moran forces, confused by contradictory orders and ships firing on each other, couldn't respond effectively. Earth's defense fleet, which had been preparing a last desperate stand against the coming Moran invasion, seized the opportunity to launch a surprise attack. Emperor Krell, faced with a rebellion he couldn't control and his command structure in chaos, had made an unexpected decision. He had offered Jia a deal. "Your victory is impressive, human," he had said as his flagship burned around them. "I recognize strength when I see it. Perhaps our peoples can find a way besides destruction." Now, 6 months later, that conversation had led to peace. The Moran Empire would withdraw from human colonies and establish trade instead of conquest. Both sides would benefit without bloodshed. "They're ready for you," an aide said, approaching Jia. Taking a deep breath, she walked to the center of the hall. All eyes turned to her, human and Moran alike. Emperor Krell, now wearing ceremonial rather than battle armor, nodded to her with something almost like respect. "Jia Kim," announced Earth's president, "on behalf of all humanity, We thank you for your extraordinary courage and ingenuity. Against impossible odds, you stood alone and changed the course of history." Jia looked out at the crowd. Cameras broadcasted her image to every human colony. Children across the galaxy now played at being Jia of Sector 7. Schools taught about her techniques. Military academies studied her strategies. The shy maintenance worker who had spent her life being overlooked now had difficulty with all the attention. But she had an important message to deliver. "I was nobody," she began, her voice clear and strong. "Just a maintenance worker that people barely noticed. But that's what made my victory possible. The Morans looked for armies and found none. They never thought to look for someone like me." She looked directly at Emperor Kral. "What I learned from this war is that we should never underestimate anyone, human or Moran. Everyone has value. Everyone matters." Kral nodded slowly, his 4 eyes blinking in the Moran gesture of agreement. After the ceremony, Jia walked through the rebuilt Colony 12, now renamed New Hope. Children ran up to her, asking for stories. Adults who had once passed her in hallways without a glance now stopped to thank her. Near the colony center stood a small statue, not of Jia in triumph, but of her in her maintenance uniform, holding a simple tool. The plaque read, "Never underestimate what one person can do." Jia touched the statue's base gently. She had never wanted fame or recognition, but she was glad for one thing. People who felt like nobodies might look at her story and realize they too had value. They too could make a difference. As the sun set over New Hope Colony, Jia Kim walked home. The once forgotten maintenance worker. The woman who had faced an empire alone. Nobody no more.